I've been sailing for a long time. My dad has always been really into it, and he took me out on sailboats ever since I was a little kid. By the time I was in my early 20s, I had probably spent hundreds of hours on them. I knew them backwards and forwards, and I felt extremely confident in my ability to navigate and sail. It was around this time that I started dating Nicole, this girl I met in college. We both went to school on the coast, and I really liked her. I wanted to impress, so of course I suggested we go out sailing together. I grabbed my dad's boat and planned a trip that would take us to a small island to watch the sunset. The island was only about a dozen miles offshore, so I figured it would be a great little trip. When we set out, everything looked perfect. The water was a little choppy, but I had been in far worse many times, so it didn't faze me. We set off at around 5 in the evening. I had the ropes and sail all rigged, so we caught the wind for maximum speed. I wanted to put on a show, so I spun the ship's wheel back and forth to catch the waves, making the boat bounce over the swells. We'd been sailing for about 45 minutes, and I was standing on top of the boat adjusting some lines for the wind when Nicole walked behind the boat's wheel. She spun it, similar to the way that I'd been doing, but didn't account for the change in wind or the waves. The boat changed direction, with the wind suddenly coming in from the other side. The sail caught the wind and swung out over the boat, hitting my head hard. I stumbled and fell off the boat into the ocean. I was taken completely off guard and accidentally swallowed a mouthful of salty water. I swam back up to the surface to see the back of the sailboat flying away at what must have been at least 15 miles an hour. I swam after it, calling out to Nicole to come back around, but after just a few seconds, the boat was already far away. I saw Nicole standing at the back of the boat with her hands covering her mouth, screaming. She finally went back to the wheel, but by then, I lost sight of the boat behind the waves. I yelled out again, but there was no answer. I looked all around me and could only see the meter-tall waves bobbing me up and down. The water was freezing cold, probably in the 50s. I kicked off my shoes and took note of everything I had on me. Jeans, t-shirt, phone. I thought about the phone for a minute, but figured I'd have no luck with that. It was waterlogged, and there was no service out here anyway. I felt my head vibrate with the pain. I put my hand up and felt my head where the boom had hit me. My hand came away bright red. I cursed and focused on treading water. I was trying to think of what I could do, but my thoughts were sluggish. I realized I was probably concussed. I was something like 10 miles from shore and 4 or 5 from the island. 5 miles is not an impossible swim. But on the other hand, I was concussed, freezing, and unsure of the exact direction that the island lay. If I started swimming and was off by just a few degrees, I could miss it completely. So I decided to wait and tread water. The minutes passed excruciatingly slow. My fingers were shriveled and completely numb with cold. My mind focused on the motions of my hands and feet, forward and back. I tried to clear my head, but I felt my breathing speeding up. How long would it take? Could I tread water for an hour? 2 hours? Why hadn't Nicole turned the ship around yet? What if she couldn't figure out the radio to call for help? Push forward, push backward. I thought I felt something brush at my foot. I yelped and looked down. I couldn't see much. The water was pretty murky and slightly red from my blood. My head pounded. I kept swimming and searched all around me. Every shark documentary I've ever seen was playing out in my head. Minutes passed, and I calmed down a little bit. Forward, backward, push, pull. I was furious with myself. Why wasn't I wearing a life jacket? I knew why. People rarely actually wear life jackets while sailing unless they're in a storm or dangerous situation. I realized that with just the two of us there, with one of us being a complete novice, it was a dangerous situation. I punched the water in frustration. I tried to estimate how long I'd been treading water. My breathing was hard, and I felt the cold grip my chest. I bobbed up high on a swell and saw the sun low on the horizon. It was going to be dark soon. I thought about it hard. I'd planned it so we'd have half an hour before sunset, right? Or was it a full hour? If it was sunset now, that must mean I'd been swimming for an hour, right? I thought back over my life. I didn't want to die. I had so much left to do. All of my past failures flashed in front of my mind. The time I got cut from the high school football team. How it felt when I got my rejection letter from MIT. I didn't want to remember all these things before I died. Why couldn't I think of happy memories? My head slipped below the waves and I caught another mouthful of seawater. It shocked my system and I pushed myself back up above the water. I tried floating on my back, but the rough water splashed salt down my nose. I kept treading. Had I been out there for 2 hours? 3? Or worse, less than that? The cold was deep and penetrating. I felt my heartbeat in my ears. The water rushed over my head. I fought back to the surface, coughing out the water. It came over me again, and I felt myself sinking. I pushed myself to the surface again and shouted. I kicked and pushed and pulled, and that's when I heard it. The sound of a helicopter. I spun around and saw a helicopter off in the distance. I waved my arms and saw the flashlight swivel towards me. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. They checked me over on the way back. Apparently, my core body temperature was in the low 90s. Nicole was freaking out, as I'm sure you can imagine. By the time she got back to the ship's wheel, she had already lost sight of me. Not only that, but she had no experience sailing, so she was having a hard time navigating at all. Luckily, she figured out the radio and got the Coast Guard called. So, take it from me, wear your life jackets. If you're interested in more stories, you can click here to see a new one, or subscribe below